It always feels so quiet in the dark. It always feels so stark. How silence grows under the moon. And it's always gone so soon. I used to think that I was bold. I used to think love was for fun. Now all my stories have been told, except for one. As the stars start to align, I hope you take it as a sign that you'll be okay. Everything will be okay. And if the seven hells collapse, although the day will be my last, oh, you will be okay. When I'm gone, you'll be okay.
Hi there, and welcome to another episode of Saturday Night Shrinking. I'm your host, Amora Sun, registered real-time shrinky dink. And today I thought I would talk about something a little bit more serious. So I wanted to just focus on the play and interviews with lovely cast members before the play launched. However, now that we are finished, I want to get back to the chunky, meaty, sinewy, gristly content of my expertise. And I'm still shrinking. I know it might astonish you. It astonishes me every day that I'm able to continue to shrink and make art. The shrinking feeds the art feeds the shrinking. I'll tell you, in my experience working with professional creative types, a lot of them see shrinks. But if somebody doesn't know what they want, if somebody doesn't know what will make them happy, ain't nobody gonna be able to do it from outside themselves. So I like to just get back to basics, and today I'd like to talk about a subject that I've written quite extensively about, and you can find my writings on this subject if you Google The Yellowknifer. That's NNSL Media, which is a lovely northern publication that's now changed publishing hands probably about 3 or 4 times. So I had a monthly column for about 2 years, maybe 3 years, give or take, kind of throughout the pandemic. And in this column, I addressed everything from communication, relationship issues. There was a rash of sexual assaults in Yellowknife that I spoke to, workplace bullying, just endless. And then I also spoke to what makes a rapist. And I have treated rapists as well as their victims for, I would say, give or take about 10 years. In my first 3 years of practice, I didn't really want to touch it. But then as I started to learn how prevalent this is based on poor levels of sex education, based on poor distribution of information, based on rural versus urban access, and the pockets within, it made a lot of sense to me to continue to research it and really cultivate skill and expertise in moving through things. So in every industry, you have bad apples. And over the last 5 to 7 years, I provided counseling to people who weren't just sexually assaulted or raped or sexually harassed or groped or coerced into sex. There's so many different variations of sexual violence. But they were betrayed by a person in a position of authority. So this could have been a teacher, it could have been a police officer, it could have been a member of the military, it could have been a respected family member, it could have been another counselor. I have known in my time 4 male counselors who have sexually assaulted clients. And let me just be very clear here. The definition of sexual assault, if it's perpetrated by someone in a position of trust, is very clear. If you fall in quote unquote love with your patient, or your patient falls in quote unquote love with you, number one, you're idiots, because it's not a real relationship. It's a limerent relationship. It's like falling in love with a cartoon character, okay? When I am counseling you, I'm not myself. That's not me. If you only think that someone will, give you that unconditional positive regard, if you're projecting so much of your unmet longing needs on a therapist, and you think that they are so magical and awe-inspiring and all-knowing, then and if that therapist doesn't correct you, it's evil. It's evil. It always falls on the therapist to clarify that role division. It's not a fair playing field. When someone enters therapy, they are coming to you for your assistance with something. You, as the counselor, have all the power in that relationship. That's why, for many, it's such a spiritually moving process, because that person is entrusting you with some very sensitive aspects of who they are. For you to take advantage and abuse your power is one of the worst things ever. And when I first started dating in New York City, I met a man. He was from Staten Island. And unfortunately, his parents had gone to see a couples therapist when he was young. And he explained to me that after attending couples therapy for a year or so, or maybe it was multiple years, I can't really recall, his father began having an affair with the female counselor. And I was disgusted. And of course, I told him how reprehensible that was, how that should never have happened, how that's a very blatant disregard and violation of ethical boundaries and of trust. It's very, very, very abusive. And that person, that woman counselor, should have been removed from the industry. She should have had her license revoked. I don't know what happened to her. I have known several male counselors who have violated those professional boundaries. They have either had sexual intercourse with it's typically female clients. Sometimes it's male on male. Sometimes it's female on female. I've never known a female therapist to do this to a male client or a female client, or any shade of gender. What can happen with a lot of male therapists, as we can see in the popular television show Frasier. Frasier, as a side note, Frasier inspired me in some ways to become a shrink. I just liked him. I liked his character. It was really funny. But Frasier was also, as my good philosophy teacher friend points out, he was also very toxic. What can happen if you aren't getting the full experience of being a shrink? So the full experience of being a female shrink is half the time clients believe what you're saying and treat you seriously. The other half the time, you're constantly being challenged and undermined because you're a girl. If you're not experienced if you don't have that full brunt of both veneration and devaluation, if you're only getting the veneration, it's very easy for you to really start to believe that you're the shit. And you can become very glib, and you can become highly manipulative. You can become very, very navel-gazing and narcissistic. And it's typically these male counselor guys that have inappropriate, sexually abusive relationships with their clients. And when I confronted the first male therapist that I worked with who did this, he sent me a text message one day. It was on Facebook Messenger, inviting me to go golfing with him and a member of our therapy group. Now, she had been discharged from the therapy group, I think about a month earlier. She was still an active client of his individually and within the organization. So the golden rule is you need 2 years to pass between termination of a therapeutic relationship and befriending and or dating a person. And you need that distance, that healthy distance and space for you to essentially lose that level of influence over the client. Because people be peoplein', the subconscious mind is a very pervious, porous membrane. And if I happen to remind somebody of, say, Demi Moore, wishful thinking. Demi Moore is like one of my first. I was just like in love with Demi Moore when I was young. Definitely one of the first women crushes I ever had. Anyway, if I remind somebody of someone that they like at a very subconscious level, they could, develop feelings of limerence for me and project that onto me forever and ever and ever. You need 2 years to pass after we're done therapy in order for that to fade away. So that if they bump into me doing something and it's a spontaneous kind of meeting of personalities, meeting of minds, and they're like, hey, Amora, I really enjoyed getting to know you when we were working together. I wonder if you might like to get to know one another personally. That I'm like, sure, I'm a very different person personally. Do you think you'd still be interested? Say if I'm the opposite of what you remember me being as your therapist. And if they're like, well, yeah, I'd still like to try and get to know you. I'm like, okay. It happened once. And it was with a male client that I treated for very serious stuff. And I went back to the town to deliver some sessions, and he heard tell that I was coming. And so he texted me. I'm like, okay. And I'd just come back from San Francisco, and I'd just been doing a lot of acting work and writing work. And I was like, yeah, all right, enough time has passed. I remember liking this guy, and I remember feeling like he really liked me. And I'm like, all right, let's see where it goes. So we text back and forth, back and forth. And immediately, without even meeting him, this is before our first coffee date, he's like talking about how much he wanted to hug and kiss me, and wanting to see if I could come to his house instead of meet in a public place. And I'm just like, no, I'm not interested in anything sexual right now, right out the gate. Like, that doesn't feel good to me. And he wasn't able to repair effectively, so I blocked him. That happens often. Like, clients can fall in love with the idea of you because you help them through some kind of personal block. And when it comes down to actually interacting as a human being to human being, the maturity level isn't there. Think about what a counselor has to develop into as a person. I have to develop into an incredibly emotionally mature human. I have to develop into a very excellent communicator. And if you can't match me in those two domains, we're not going to be able to have intimacy. It's just going to be impossible. So what I'd like to talk about today would be, helping somebody through that kind of betrayal trauma. And a lot of the times people don't know what to expect, or say friends and family don't know how to support. And so this is just going to be a very basic summary of some of the things you can do. So our world, our societies, wherever you are, sometimes we cling to something known as the just world hypothesis, which is a cognitive bias that convinces us that the world is really good and most people are really good. And really, most of the time, good things happen to good people. And it's quite rare for bad things to happen all the time to good people. And there aren't too many bad people. No, in fact, most people are really good. And I think that there is a value in having optimism over the human condition. However, a lot of horrible things happen. And some people, I think, they confront this just world hypothesis, fallacy, or cognitive bias, with watching true crime documentaries. And a lot of women in particular who are disproportionately affected by gender-based violence sometimes do it to, work through anxiety around it. And maybe a bit of gaslighting, the impact of microaggressions all day. It's an adaptive strategy.